It's time for another Savage Worlds review. Hey everybody, Bobby here from the GM table, and like the cold open said, it's time to do another review for a Savage Worlds product. And honestly, we're going to be having a lot of these coming soon, with Adventures Edition in full swing. Print copies are finally out, they're starting to hit stores. We're also now starting to see third-party companies really hit their stride with new settings and updated settings and all that, and more than just jump starts. We're talking full books. And today, we're covering one that I'm actually very, very surprised with. But before we get into it completely, I have a disclaimer. I was contacted by the creators of this book. They asked me to review it. They provided me with links towards preview copies of this book. Now, that is because this book is still in Kickstarter. In fact, it went into Kickstarter last Tuesday. I didn't release this review last Tuesday because I didn't want the review to go out before the Kickstarter launched, and I didn't know the exact time the Kickstarter would launch, and we try to release our videos at as early as possible, realistically, around 6 to 7 in the morning my time. So it's out all day. So instead, we pushed it back a week. Now, what is that setting? Well, if you follow the Savage community, we're a little behind because podcasts have been talking about this. Other people in the community have been talking about it, and for good reason. It is Gods and Masters. Now, when I first saw this, I was thinking, I don't actually know where I got it in my head. I thought it was a super setting, but it's a fantasy setting. And it is a kick-ass fantasy setting. First and foremost, if you need the quick review, if you just need a thumbs up from the GM table to know it's worth getting, check out the Kickstarter link below because, in my opinion, it is. But we're going to get a little more into the nitty-gritty of it. First, this is a lot of content. What I have is broken into the Player's Guide and the Game Master's Guide. The Player's Guide alone is over 150 pages. The Game Master's Guide is another 100 pages. I was worried when I saw these high numbers. I've been asked to review other products that actually never even made it on the show because I try to not bash products that just I don't like for personal preference. If I put out a review about something I don't think's good, it's because I think people need to know it's not good because I think they're being cheated. If it's just not up my alley, I don't review it. And I have had other games come into the channel that asked for review that I kid you not had 100 pages of fluff before we even got to character creation. I don't care about those kinds of games. I want to get to what makes the game useful for me, not why you think your world is amazing. Fantasy games tend to have a lot of fluff. Now, this is no different here. Gods and Masters actually does have a lot of rich lore and a lot of things going on in the world. But how it's laid out makes a massive, massive difference. There is fluff in the beginning, kind of this primer of the world, history, where you're going, but then it gets right into character creation. As far as characters, in the book I have, you have humans, and you basically have lizard people. Humans have a bunch of different cultures you can then pick from that'll tweak your character. And even this other race has race variants. There is no standard version. It's very 5th edition in that, where D&D 5th edition in that, where you have like the core part of the race and then you pick which subtype you are. This has it with their lizard people. Elemental based. Still pretty cool, pretty interesting stuff. Then it gets into a little more fluff. But this is where it started to hook me. Because it gets into fluff of things like, here's the stuff about the Imperial Legion. And as it goes through it, every section includes not just, here's life in the barracks, but then they give you a map of the barracks. And it's fluff done in a way that's very usable. Not just reading a book. It's not just lore. It's broken down and it's built for a game, which matters for me. Now, on top of that, you'll have a chunk of, here's this faction, then here's what it's like being in this faction. And factions are a huge portion of this setting. Every character has to pick a faction. I would highly advise, once you're looking at this, especially for like your first game, have all your players just pick one faction. It's going to make your life a lot easier. But with that, everyone has to pick a faction. When you get into the section of playing a character in that faction, it immediately starts with, here are benefits you automatically get for being in that faction, and here are kind of penalties, hindrances, downsides, whatever you want to list them, because they're not all specifically hindrances. You get just by being part of this faction. You don't get a choice in that. Your choice was which faction you went into. But then on top of that, you get edges that only that faction can pick up, hindrances that only that faction can pick up. Right now, we're still in mediocre territory. It's good. It's well laid out. I'm liking it. But then you get into stuff like there's a faction that is about fighting vampires as necromancers. And their section has a whole area on necromancy. There's a section that's kind of a holy light church. And they have a whole section on working with the church and going up. The Imperial Legion has sections on, if you work with the Imperial Legion, you're in the military. So in that, playing a character in that section then isolates all the mechanics for being in the military and going up ranks. Every single faction has meat that I could rip out and go, this is just usable in almost any game. There are a few things that are notable. They talk about how you can have alchemy. Alchemist is one of the occupations you can take. They list several powers and how much the potion would cost in alchemy. But for the life of me, I couldn't find an actual rule other than crafters use repair, generally, like even carpenters, on how you're making the potions. So little oversight, but again, this is all stuff that's being revised. I'm trying not to poke too many holes because that's all being fixed as we speak. But there is some cool stuff in here, and it is very, very versatile. Yes, the book has a situation where it is very much written for its setting. The religious stuff is based around the religions in here, but you can scratch the numbers off and this becomes a very usable book. In the same way, Deadlands Noir is like my go-to investigation book, because you can just pull the Deadlands part out. Now it's just a handbook on how to make detective games. ETU is the current modern horror book. You take the college sections out, it's still everything you need for modern horror. This is, until we get the new version, this is the fantasy companion. And I know there are other fantasy settings for Savage Worlds. This is my choice for the companion. It doesn't have a massive bestiary, but has a usable bestiary. More importantly, the bestiary is the monster. It then has a ton of NPCs. It has mage templates. So you can take any NPC and make them a mage, and there's different types of mages. Speaking of that, one of my favorites is they handled something a lot of people complain about in Savage Worlds, of making different types of magic feel different. There are a lot of different types of magic here. There is straight up divine magic. There is occult magic, which is also worship based and it's sacrifice based. There is also magic, but it's elemental based. And you have to pick a school. You can take an edge to pick an additional school and you can stack your schools. But when you take a school, it gives you your own list of basic modifiers. If you're still kind of new to how powers work in Adventures Edition, a lot of the powers have modifiers within them that only apply to that power. But at the beginning of that chapter, there's the kind of like the common modifiers that you can apply to anything. This book says you got to scrap those common modifiers. The common modifiers you get are based on the kind of magic you do. And there are 0-point modifiers, as well as ones that you pay for to add cool effects. Anything that's a 0-point modifier is something you have to apply to all your spells or powers that you're casting from your school or your arcane background, because some backgrounds have schools, some are just, it's this one thing. But anyways, if it's a 0 cost, you have to apply it. And there will be good things that come with it and bad things, and it twists and it shapes and it goes above and beyond. It kind of brings it back to the trappings that people were doing in Deluxe, where selecting fire wasn't just fire damage, but then it was Fire could have armor piercing. Acid could have lasting damage. Now, even then, it was a bunch of lists. This is going, if it's from the school of magic, it will always have these properties, and you can modify it further. Doing that gives powers a lot more flavor. For those of you who have been wanting necromancers, I will tell you this is some of the best necromancy rules I've seen for Savage Worlds. At least as far as being simple, doesn't need a whole book for it. They replaced zombie with raised dead. It has some very interesting stuff of it lets you make zombies, skeletons, and mummies. How much undead you can raise and how powerful of undead you can raise is based on your rank, which has some cool stuff. The necromancers can eventually take a legendary edge that's kind of like sidekick, but instead you pick one of the undead you've raised and it becomes a sidekick that starts gaining levels and you no longer have to keep casting it to keep this thing around. Lots of cool stuff. In fact, I'm now thinking, I don't think raised dead makes you keep casting to keep them around. They're just there till they're gone now. I might be wrong. That's one of those I just discovered a couple days ago and haven't really picked apart. Plus, again, it's in edits. Things might get tweaked during this. But if any of this has really sparked your interest, I suggest you check it out. It's really, really cool. Like, that's the best way to put it. This gives me very much the D&D-esque fantasy feel without it being the superheroes level power that, yes, D&D tends to become in late game, which means a lot of settings that try to go, we're doing D&D fantasy, just focus on, oh, it's super high power, rather than the flavor and how things interact and the nuances that can be there in certain settings like that the mechanics bring in. This has nuance in spade. This is going to be a very versatile setting, especially if you go, everyone's one faction, that's the type of adventure we run, do a different factions can be very different. If you go a military campaign with requisitions and getting promotions and all of that stuff because you work with the Empire, it's a very different game. And then if you go with the dark kind of culty religion that you're a group of, that not only like are you rolling a cult to cast and everything's kind of dark and mysterious and it's dark gods, you have to make sacrifices. These sacrifice rules I actually really love. And I'm probably going to take and use for most of my religious stuff. Even good gods, I'll just, change the axe, because the sacrifices have something you have to do every week, something you have to do every fortnight, which is every 2 weeks, and something you have to do every month. And you have to keep that to appease your god. And you can take an edge to get like more minor gods with it, because there's like the one big god that's giving all the power in that group. But you can tweak it, you can massage it. It's very mutable. It's something you can modify for your own setting very, very easily, and it adds a lot of cool stuff. Anyways, check out the Kickstarter link below. Gods and Masters. I'm really impressed with this setting. I'm hoping we see more on this channel and just in general. And even though I got review copies of PDFs and stuff, I think I'm picking this up physically. Anyways, I'll catch you guys later. Bye. Hey everybody, I wanted to let you know we now have a public Discord server, link below, where you can hang out, chat with the GMs from the show, chat with cast members from our live streams. Yeah, if you didn't know, we also have live streams on Twitch. We do the video on demand and post them up here on Fridays. But if you want to find out stuff about that, if you want to see areas where you can drop in and watch the cast do text-based RP between adventures, get to know more of the characters, get to know more of those slow, intimate scenes, that's going on. You can drop in and look at the chat where we actually discuss upcoming shows, all that stuff, as well as community areas where you can hang out with other fans and other people in the GM Table community. All of that is now part of our official Discord server. Again, link down below.